These give rise to bodhicitta, the thought, I will by all means establish all limitless mother beings at the level of perfect, unsurpassable enlightenment. To that end, I will listen to this profound Dharma and put it into practice accordingly. The Dharma that we speak of today is a torch lighting the way to freedom, complete instructions on the preliminary practice of the profound and secret heart essence of the Dakini. From among the virtuous beginning, middle, and end of this text, we're currently looking at the virtuous middle, the main body of the text, which is comprised of two parts: how to follow a spiritual friend, the route of the path, and the main explanation of the stages for setting out on the path. We've covered the first, and we're looking at the second, which is comprised of Section 1, the general preliminary practice. Section 2, the specific preliminary practice for the yogas of the two phases. We've covered the first. We're now looking at the second, which contains two subsections, the common preliminaries, namely the 4 mind changings. Secondly, the uncommon special preliminaries that sow the seeds of the profound path in 5 stages. From among these two, we've covered the first. We're currently looking at the second, the uncommon special preliminaries in 5 stages. This is comprised of taking refuge at the entrance to the path, rousing bodhicitta, the root of the path, purifying unfavorable conditions on the path, the meditation on Vajrasattva, gathering the accumulations, the favorable conditions on the path, the way to offer the mandala, and training in Guru Yoga, the heart of the whole path. We've covered the first 4, and we're looking at the 5th, training in Guru Yoga, the heart of the whole path. This itself is comprised of 2 main points: general points to be understood, and clarification of the points of the training in this case. We're looking at the first, general points to be understood, which contains 3 subsections: the reason one needs to be diligent, convinced this is the essence of the path, different ways to practice, and the benefits and purpose of exerting oneself in this way. We've covered the first, and we're looking at the second. Different ways to practice. This itself contains a few different sections. First of all, general principles in making devotion and respect the path. Secondly, specific points on the different stages of receiving blessings, the approach, and so forth. We've covered the first, and we're looking at the second, specific points on the different stages of receiving blessings and blessings, which is comprised of, first of all, a general explanation and a particular explanation. We've covered the first. We're looking at the second, the particular explanation. So this involves, first of all, visualizing the object of prayer, secondly, accumulating merit with the 7 branches. The meaning of the Vajraguru mantra, and 4th, receiving the empowerments. Okay, so we're looking at the accumulation of 7 branches. So if we go back to page 245, that section ended with an explanation of how one supplicates, visualizes the Guru before one supplicates, one pointedly receives the blessings, and by force of one's devotion the Guru melts into light, dissolves inseparably with you. Your mind and the Guru's mind merge inseparably like water into water, and you rest uncontrived in natural awareness. This was at the bottom of page 245, over to the top of page 246. So then after that comes visualizing the object of prayer. We covered that section, and then began accumulating merit with the 7 branches, namely prostration, the antidote to pride, and so on. So we covered some of these branches. We reach the 5th rite, exhorting the teachers to turn the wheel of Dharma, the antidote to bewilderment. We covered that yesterday. So we'll continue where we left off, page 249, and now the 6th of the 7 branches, praying not to pass into nirvana, the antidote to false views. In the presence of all the teachers and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in this and other Buddha fields who have completed their work, benefiting beings, and now wish to pass into nirvana, emanate numerous bodies and imagine that they stay into cyclic existence as empty, working for the welfare of beings. Such a prayer will purify the negative deeds that result in having a short life, and so on. So this explains how to perform this branch and also the benefits of doing so. So our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, when he reached the age of 80, of course Buddha essentially was beyond aging, beyond distinctions such as young and old, but from the perspective of beings he displayed the process of aging. He manifested the guise of aging, as we see in the accounts of Buddha Shakyamuni's life story. Of course, the Buddha is an indestructible kaya, indestructible state. It's completely beyond distinctions such as young and old, beyond change and fluctuation, beyond aging. But that's how it is for Buddha himself, in the enlightened state itself, but from the perspective of those of us who still have concepts of old and young and so on, then Buddha manifests the process of aging. Processes we can relate to, right? So, when Buddha reached 80, there was a point where he told his disciple Mudgalyana, "I will soon pass away." And it said that at this point the Mara Garabonchuk blocked Mudgalyana's ears, so he actually didn't hear what Buddha said. If Mudgalyana had requested Buddha to, or if the students had requested Buddha to remain at that point, he would have stayed for several more years. So it wasn't Mudgalyana's shortcoming, it was that Mara had interfered. So no one requested Buddha to remain, to live longer. So when Buddha said in the presence of disciples like Ananda and Mudgalyana, "Soon I will pass away," the Mara intervened, blocked their ears so they didn't hear what was said, and so as a result they didn't respond and request him to remain. But there was one very pure bhikshu, another disciple, who was nearby and heard what Buddha said. He rushed over and said, "Buddha, our teacher, you must not pass away. If you pass away, if you leave us, it'll be like the sun falling from the sky. It'll be like darkness. We'll be enshrouded by darkness. We'll have no one to guide us. We'll be utterly helpless. Without you, we will not have a teacher. Without the teacher, we will not know how to follow the teachings. Please remain." He made this request. And so Buddha prolonged his life a little bit in response to that request. So it's very important to make this request, to request the Buddhas, the teachers, to not pass into nirvana. Without teachers, we do not have the teaching. Without teachings, we do not know how to progress on the path. And And without that, then we cannot remove our false views. We'll remain entrenched in false views, in wrong view, misunderstanding. So this is why it's so important to request the teachers to remain. And as it says here, this is why and how praying, requesting the teachers to not pass into nirvana, to remain, is an antidote to false views. False views like denying the presence of the three jewels, the value of the three jewels, denying karmic cause and effect, past and future lives. So Buddha and the Buddha's teachings can dispel such false views. These false views that blinker and misguide sentient beings. Thanks to the presence of the appearance of Buddha Shakyamuni and the appearance of all of the great masters who appeared in his wake up until now, one after the other. All of our great lineage masters, like I think of my late gurus, Dilgu Khyentse Rinpoche, Khema Daza Rinpoche, Khema Chögye Rinpoche, and so on. Thanks to their remaining, to their living long, that the teachings remain in this earth, that the light of the teaching remains. So when we make long life offerings to the teacher, long life ceremonies, and recite long life prayers, and so on. These are also antidotes to false views. Because when you request the teacher to remain, because the teacher is the presence of the teacher is the antidote to false views. So, from among the different types of offering, the offering of the 7 branches is said to be unsurpassable. And in the secret mantra Vajrayana tradition, and then in the Nyingma Vajrayana, we have the Kama tradition and Terma tradition, all orally transmitted, and tradition and the tradition of treasure revelations. And in the Kama tradition, then we have Doja Lupan, famous liturgy for the 7 more branches beginning Doja Lupan, which is an unsurpassable offering. Whether it be Vajrayana or the Sutra vehicle of characteristics, the practice of the 7 branches appears in pretty much every liturgy, pretty much every practice, because there is just no greater offering than this, no greater offering for accumulating merit than this. In some, for instance, Vajrayana liturgies, you have the 7 branches taught or practiced from the tantric perspective, from the great perfection perspective. In short, the 7 branches are so precious and important. So we've extended the program by 1 day, right? So yesterday the organizers came to me and they said, Rinpoche, you can extend the program by 1 day. I got permission to teach for 1 more day. So maybe I can have time to tell a few stories.
oh yeah, the consensus and around the isn't true. I usually the Tawana Kempo Hapo. Then do what Jimmy Nekoso, Dutch Bangapia, and some chick master, Tibu Punga, Dutch Mato, then a drug to a mother will do function with Kona Chavacheli, cook it in a Kunze Kazu, chewing and chewing coach.
There's stories in the sutras about different disciples, like it says the lay practitioner Chunda. There's also the story of how when Buddha passed into parinirvana, at some point there were 500 arhats, close disciples of Buddha Shakyamuni. And after Buddha's parinirvana, these 500 disciples gathered together. All 499 of them had attained arhatship. It was only Shariputra who had not yet attained arhatship. And then one of the other disciples went to him and said, you've made 7 grave mistakes throughout your time as Buddha's attendant. And they mentioned several things, 7 failings of Shariputra, and he felt such remorse, such regret. He felt so much sadness that he spent decades by Buddha's side as his close attendant, one of his closest students, and yet still he hadn't attained arhatship. And he developed such intense renunciation. He took himself off to practice, and in the course of a night, the course of a day, he attained arhatship. It was that intense renunciation that pushed him for that last stretch of the path and brought him to the realization of arhatship. So it just shows whoever you are, as a practitioner, renunciation, fierce renunciation is so important. So, in this story, when one of the students comes before Shariputra and says, accuses him of 7 faults, 7 shortcomings, one of them is that when Buddha said, I'm going to pass away, when he announced his imminent death, Shariputra was right there, but he said nothing. He didn't request Buddha to remain to live longer. Actually, as I said, the Maras had blocked his ears, so it wasn't like a personal failing. But anyway, he was accused of this fault. So anyway, I told this story briefly in connection with this, praying not to pass into nirvana, the antidote to false views. It is just so important and so beneficial to request the teachers to remain, to request them to live long, to live longer, to stay with us. So your teachers, your root gurus, those who show you the kindness of bestowing empowerment, transmission, pith instructions, who guide you on the path, it's so important to request them to not pass into nirvana, but to remain here on this earth with us and to live long. To request them to remain working for the welfare of beings. And as it says here, the benefits of making such prayers, well, this branch is, generally this is an antidote to false views, but as it says here, the benefit of making such prayers is that you purify the negative deeds you've done that will result in having a short life and also untimely death, as Kimataza Rinpoche used to say. Serving the Guru brings the student a long life. So in the past we've taken life, we've killed, we've hunted. Sorry, whether it be this life or past lives. We've performed many negative deeds. So supplicating the teachers in this way is a supreme method for purifying those negativities. There's really no graver, no more negative deed than taking others' lives, than killing. So sometimes I feel a bit uncomfortable with myself. Sort of give advice to those of you here. I've given some advice to the lamas and so on here. Don't do this, don't do that, and so on and so forth. And upon reflection, I feel kind of very uncomfortable about it. Like, who am I to advise other people? There are other lamas and chugus and so on in the assembly here. I feel like I have no qualities no qualities from my own side. It's not for me to give such advice, but anyway. Nevertheless, what I said, I did say it out of with a pure intention, with concern for the teachings and for beings. And so, actually, in a sense, it's not really a problem. Saying what I've said is not really a problem. Like, in a sense, it's not a problem that I've said what I've said over the past days, the different advice and kind of criticisms and so on I've made for those here, because those of you here receiving teachings from me have received teachings from me. We have this teacher-student relationship. Even though some of you are so incredibly learned, still you've come here kind of pretending you're not learned and being open to the receiving teaching. And then it's in that, anyway, when you have the student-teacher relationship, it's the teacher's responsibility to give advice and counsel, right? But these days we have things, this new situation, things are live streamed, they're recorded, they're shared online. So a lot of people who are not here will hear what I've said. And that's potentially the problem. One of my root gurus was always scolding, giving very harsh scoldings. That was kind of the way he taught. Khyentse Daze Rinpoche is pretty much the same. So I have this habit, I guess, from them. But nevertheless, in hindsight, sort of looking back on some of the things I've said, I felt uncomfortable and regret. Or it would have been better I didn't say such things. It's not for me to give such scoldings. Not for me to give such criticisms or advice. But the words have already left my mouth. So what to do? if masters like Kimbo Chugi Rinpoche and Kimbo Dazo Rinpoche were to say such things, give such scoldings, then it was absolutely appropriate, beneficial, only beneficial. But for someone like me to give the same kind of scoldings, it's not so appropriate. There's one of Kimbo Chugi Rinpoche's disciples, Dharma friend. He's a Lama in his own right. He established his own Shedra and so on. And he gave a lot of scoldings, That was his way. Gave a lot of scoldings and criticisms and so on. Anyway, it got to the point where everyone just left, all the students just left. Because he was just so harsh in his scoldings. And so it seems one should be careful about such things, right? There's another disciple, Kimbo Dawang, who's like a really revered teacher, kind of the same level of like Kimbo Tsujum Lodro and Kimbo Sadagya and so on. He would teach really meticulously. His teachings rooted in scripture and reasoning and so on, but with very few scoldings. His teachings didn't give scoldings and criticisms to the students. They didn't contain advice that really forcefully pointed at their faults. And I said to him, your teaching is excellent, but wouldn't it be good to, include a bit more scoldings for the sake of the students so they can recognize their faults? And he replied kind of in the same vein. He said, it's not the age for that. These days it's better to avoid too many scoldings, it's not the age for that. So, a sign of the times maybe. Anyway, let's return to the text. Dedicating to enlightenment the antidote to doubt, so this is the seventh branch, using your positive action to symbolize all sources of good. Dedicate them all together. So, dedication. Dedication is something unique to Buddha's teachings. Non-Buddhist traditions do not have the practice of dedication. Non-Hindus, Christians, Christianity, Islam, they do not have a tradition of dedication. This is unique to Buddha's teachings. So when was the first time Buddha dedicated? In Yangpachen. And this is mentioned in Khebrapaktu Ashvagosha's text praising the unique qualities of Buddha and his teaching. I don't remember the exact lines of verse, but he highlights this as a unique quality of Buddha's teachings. He said, the practice of dedicating roots of virtue to enlightenment is unique to your teaching, Buddha. What are the benefits of dedicating? If a bodhisattva dedicates merit, if you dedicate merit to enlightenment, your roots of virtue will be infused by skillful means. That's the power of bodhicitta. They'll become invincible through the power of the main part, free of concepts. And through the power of dedication, they will increase further and further. So dedication is so powerful. It serves to increase our merit. So again, this is dedication is described in the Prajnaparamita scriptures and in the Ornament of Clear Realization. And again, it is something unique to Buddha's teachings. In one of the sutras, the Sutra of 100 Parables, Buddha said, dedicating merit, when you dedicate merit, you ensure that it will never exhaust until the final ripening. Just like a drop of water, once poured into the ocean, will not exhaust, will not evaporate until the whole ocean has exhausted. So when you dedicate your virtue to enlightenment, you are ensuring that it does not go to waste, that it does not go to waste, that it does not run out, but it keeps on bearing fruit until you attain complete enlightenment. The same point is spoken of in the way of Bodhisattva. So we could tell some stories about dedication. Two of these. One is the story about dedicating merit, Buddha dedicating merit to the hungry ghost and young bhajan, and also dedicating the merit of the magician Bhadra. We told these stories already. Because as a student of a Dhamma sibling of Pajra Rinpoche, a really extraordinary practitioner, and there was someone who died, was killed on a journey. This is in East Tibet. And so for the sake of this deceased person, the people were making sur, meaning burnt offerings, which are often made specifically for the deceased, those in the intermediate state. Anyway, sorry to backtrack. Conflict broke out. There was a kind of conflict or small war, and several people were killed. So for the sake of these people, the locals were making sur offerings, including this Dharma friend of Pajra Rinpoche. And they presumed that everyone involved in the fight had been killed, but actually one man had managed to escape and was still alive, but no one knew. He'd escaped from the battlefield, run into the mountains, and for several days, after several days, he ran out of food, and he was on the verge of starvation. And then he started to smell this really fragrant scent, the smell of delicious food. And then he stopped feeling hungry. And he managed to make his way home. People were amazed to see him. They thought he'd been killed. And he told them what had happened, how he'd survived. the battle, how he'd fled, and also managed to survive on the road on his way back home for like a week or so without any food. And he'd had this experience of being constantly smelling this delicious scent and somehow just not getting hungry. So he was receiving the sur offerings that were being dedicated to him because people thought had presumed he'd died, right? So anyway, the point of this story is it shows that when you make these offerings, such as sur offering, and you dedicate them to beings actually receive those offerings by the force of your dedication. They literally receive it. Or if the practitioner making the sur offering is accomplished and realized, like this master was, there's a Dhamma friend of Pajar Rinpoche, then the being really can receive the offering. So when a relative or loved one passes away, then it's wonderful if you can make lavish offerings for their benefit and dedicate the merit of those offerings to them. But you shouldn't think that that's the only way you can benefit them. You know, if you feel obliged to go beyond your means to spend money you don't have for the sake of the deceased, and that people can end up feeling very kind of exhausted with the Buddha Dharma and end up actually converting to Christianity, from a financial motivation. With a financial motivation, so that's a misunderstanding. If you have the means, then sure, make lavish offerings and dedicate the merit. That's wonderful. But if you don't, you can still benefit the deceased in a really significant way by making a sur offering, which involves no more than, say, a spoonful of flour and some simple ingredients, a sincere heart, and proper dedication. That will be of real benefit to the deceased as they pass through the intermediate state. Okay, so dedicating the sources of good that we've created to unsurpassable enlightenment is very important. For even if we've accumulated merit, if we fail to dedicate it, as Shantideva says, good works gathered over 1,000 ages can be destroyed by a single flash of anger. Similarly, if you don't dedicate merit to enlightenment, even if it's not destroyed by anger, for instance, when it ripens, well, it'll ripen just once, like the fruit of a plantain tree, and it won't bear more fruit. So if we don't dedicate merit to enlightenment, it becomes vulnerable. It will easily become exhausted, either destroyed by anger or by just ripening in a mundane, just bringing about a mundane ripening and then ceasing. Anger is so destructive. It destroys, it burns virtue up. It destroys virtue, burns it up like fire burning up a feather, a bird feather. Just destroys it without trace. So, how to protect virtue from being destroyed by anger? Well, dedicating. Through dedicating. By dedicating our virtue to enlightenment, we protect it from being destroyed by conditions such as anger, and we ensure that it continues to increase and increase until we reach enlightenment. When it says a single flash of anger shatters them, meaning all the good works gathered in 1,000 ages, a single flash of anger shatters them. So there's debate about this, or there are distinctions to be made here. For instance, a single flash of anger, well, how destructive a flash of anger is depends on the object of the anger. If the object of your anger is a noble bodhisattva, then that is going to bring about a lot more destruction. If it's an ordinary being, then it's going to bring about less destruction, and so on and so forth. There's this sort of debate and discussion in Introduction to the Middle Way by Chandrakirti, amongst other texts. So, if before we get angry, before we fall prey to anger, we dedicate our virtue to enlightenment, then it will become immune to anger. Anger will not be able to destroy it. as it says, by dedicating them to enlightenment, they will never be exhausted but grow greater and greater. As Buddha said, Sagaramati, let us take an example. A drop of spit discarded on the sand will rapidly dry up immediately, just in a second. But if you spit into the ocean, then that spit will remain. For as long as the ocean is there, the spit will remain in the ocean. It won't dry up until the ocean itself dries up. So, whatever virtue you accumulate from a single money mantra or what have you, you should dedicate that virtue to enlightenment, and then it will not be exhausted. It will not go to waste.
대신도 개위 자와 두바 대양 교바당 강아라서 예전집이 유지세라 되네 교미 교버게 와다 되네 예전 제와라 샘나게 와다 포와서는 땅이 처음에 마분난 딜소 개와지 만족난 딜소냐 포와다.
So there are 4 causes for destroying virtue. One is not dedicating. One is dedicating. One is misdedicating, perverse dedicating. So dedicating your merit to just mundane ends or negative ends. Inferior dedication. So dedicating one's merit, one's virtue to mundane ends like mundane ends. Then we have a perverse dedication, and then also boasting about one's merit and feeling regret for that which one need not regret. For instance, you accumulate virtue, but then you end up, regretting the offering you've made. For instance, that regret will destroy the virtue you accumulated. So there are these 4 causes that exhaust virtue if the virtue has not been dedicated correctly, right? On the other hand, positive actions of all different kinds, if dedicated with enlightenment, they will gain a single taste. And as it says above, they will continue to increase and definitely become the cause of Buddhahood. So virtue is so backtracking to the quotation from the sutra requested by Sagaramati, these are Buddha's own words. If you dedicate your virtue to the ocean-like wisdom of omniscience, namely to perfect enlightenment, it will never be exhausted but grow ever greater. Not only that, such merit will also definitely become the cause of Buddhahood. So there are stories, for instance, of a pig who ran around a stupa, and by the connection they made with the stupa, the blessed stupa, a seed of liberation was sowed in their being, and in the next life they attained a human rebirth and attained liberation. If such things are possible just through connection with the Buddha and his teachings, through unintended virtue, then it goes without saying that the power of virtue infused with bodhicitta is just vast, and for sure will be a cause for Buddhahood. Just as all the rivers flowing from different directions all end up flowing into the ocean, all gain a single taste, likewise all positive actions dedicated to enlightenment will also gain a single taste, meaning they'll all lead to the ultimate fruition of enlightenment. As Nagarjuna says, no other treatises explain what you, the Bhagavan, have taught to completely dedicate to all beings one's meritorious deeds. But actually, this is attributed here, this quotation. It's actually from the the treatise, the unique qualities, praising the unique qualities of Buddha and his teachings. Sorry, previously I said this was Ashwagosha's text, but it's not Ashwagosha's text. I'll find out the author, check the author's name in Sanskrit later. So here in Dujanabate's text, and likewise in Longchenpa's text also, we actually find quotations from the sutras and tantras that are sometimes misattributed. So, they'll say, as we see here, this quotation is from this text when actually it's from another text or it's written by another author. But these misattributions should not or need not be corrected. Like people would say about Longchenpa's text and so on, where we find misattributed quotations from sutras and tantras. The quotations are correct, but the sources are not always correct. But this is not a fault. This is actually a really special quality of Longchenpa's teachings, and likewise of Dujanabate's teachings here, because these masters are not sitting down and sort of planning their texts out like an ordinary person, opening up lots of scriptures, searching for a quotation that supports their point. They're writing these texts, like Longchenpa's texts were they just naturally arose within the expanse of his wisdom mind, and he wrote them down spontaneously and freely. Similar things with the first Dilgye Rinpoche. The first Dilgye Rinpoche, he was both accomplished and great accomplished master and also a great scholar. In a lot of his compositions, they would just arise spontaneously in his mind, and he would write them down freely and fluidly. And later he would actually say, I've written down these quotations from the sutras and tantras. These are quotations that actually I've never learned or come across before, but they just appeared in my mind. They just came to mind. So, check their source, the attribution. This is how it goes with these realized masters. So this quotation that Dujanabate's attributes to Nagarjuna is in fact from a treatise by a very special treatise called Praising the Unique Qualities of Buddha and His Teaching, Khyepar Paktu in Tibetan. It's a really special text which I received from teachings on in the past. And the scholars here, the teachers here, should really pay attention to this text actually, because this text, what it does is it highlights the unique qualities of Buddha's teachings, saying the qualities, exactly that, the unique qualities that are not shared by other traditions. These days there's a lot of talk about people, I guess, these days when people talk about being non-sectarian or unbiased or having respect for all religions, sometimes they then make the mistake of trying to just interpret all religions as being one and the same, say that all religious traditions essentially are the same, but actually all religious traditions are not the same. And it's a mistake to try and it's a mistake to think that it's a mistake to try and kind of present them in a way to kind of mix them all up together and make them into some homogeneous universal religious tradition. Of course, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, it's so important to have respect for all religions, but that's different from making all religions the same. So we should be aware of the unique qualities of Buddhist tradition, the things in the Buddha Dharma that are not found in other traditions, Christianity, Hinduism, and so on and so forth. Even, let's forget about other religions, even within our own Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Each of the four major traditions, Kagyu, Sakya, Gedok, Nyingma, one should be non-sectarian and unbiased in the sense of having pure appreciation and pure perception of all of these major traditions. But to say that they're all the same, that's a mistake, right? They all have their unique qualities, their unique flavor, style, approach, and for good reason, right? Kimodasa Rinpoche, he had such pure perception for all of the four traditions. He would often quote Jessen Milarepa and the great Sakya masters and so on. But did he try and present all four traditions as same? Absolutely not. When it came to teaching, for instance, Mipa Rinpoche, and Mipa Rinpoche's tradition, did he try and kind of make out that the Nyingma tradition, Mipa Rinpoche's position is just the same and in line with the position of the Sakyas and other Kagyus and so on and so forth? Absolutely not. He set forth Mipa Rinpoche's position, defended it against others, highlighted its unique qualities, refuted other positions and so on. But in short, we can say pure perception is important. Pure perception and appreciation of all traditions is important. But that's different from thinking or trying to make all traditions just one homogeneous thing. So every religious tradition, whether it be the four schools of Tibetan Buddhism or the various non-Buddhist religious traditions, they all have wonderful qualities. Wonderful, praiseworthy qualities, and without a doubt they are all genuine paths to liberation, whether it be directly or indirectly. So they should all be appreciated and respected. But that does not mean that they are the same. They are distinct paths and traditions, and that should be acknowledged, and that should also be appreciated. Likewise, bodhicitta. All religions talk about compassion and love, but a focus on all sentient beings without exception, acknowledging that all sentient beings, infinite in number, have been one's mother, have shown us kindness, generating the wish to repay that kindness, to that end generating love, compassion, and so on, for all infinite beings. This is unique to the Buddhist tradition, right? So I heard this, I don't know if it's actually true, but I heard this. Maybe some of the international students will be more kind of up on this than me. But I heard that there are some people who are today kind of making a chow mein of all of the different religious traditions, taking this from some Hindu traditions, this from Buddhist tradition, this from Christianity, mixing them all together to make something palatable, writing books, and creating something, creating all sorts of new things. So then you hear about modern Christians and modern Hindus who are taking bits and pieces from the Buddhist tradition, maybe other traditions too, mixing it with their own tradition, making some kind of new tradition. Or like you have these people, so these days you have Hindu teachers teaching something that sounds very much like bodhicitta, but they've taken that from the Buddhist tradition, right? So on with some so-called modern Christians, or people with PhDs. They get a PhD and then they, with their doctorate, they take their doctorate to be like a sort of they get their doctorate and then they start acting like a lama, teaching all sorts of funny things. Their own spiritual recipe. So we talk about a tenet system, right? A philosophical tenet system. In Tibetan this is drupta, in Sanskrit is siddhanta. This means to have followed the path and arrived at a conclusion. So to arrive at a conclusion, a philosophical position to which you are completely committed. You're so committed you will not give up. You're willing to give your life up rather than give up your philosophical position, your beliefs. So, if one is following a tradition or a system, however we translate this term, philosophical system, philosophical tradition, or we could also say maybe spiritual tradition, you need to actually follow a tradition, right? Not some kind of a mix match, new recipe. If you want to follow a tradition, you need to follow a tradition properly. Either enter the Hindu tradition properly or the Buddhist tradition properly, or what have you. Or if you don't want to follow a tradition, then don't follow a tradition. But this sort of half-hearted approach, this mix and match to serve one's own needs is not, that's not what is meant by philosophical tenet system or spiritual tradition. So now on page 251, the 400 verses states, when you, the Bhagavan, make a movement, it's never without reason. Even the breath you take is solely for being's benefit. So it says here, positive deeds performed from the 8th level up into the level of Buddhahood are all beneficial in every respect. Such beings are always in a state of profound samadhi. They never waver from it. So every movement, every action, every breath, every movement of their body, gesture, is a source of benefit for beings. In the Kevra Bhakti, the treatise previously just referenced, extolling the unique qualities of Buddha in his teachings, there's a nice story that relates to this. It might come across as a bit partisan, actually. From Okay, but I won't tell that story. The organizers have let me extend the program one day, but not 2 or 3 days. So I can tell a few more stories, but not every story. Actually, if we could, I would extend the program for 3 or 4 more days, and then I'd tell every story that came to mind. Just pour out all the stories I have. There seems to be a lot of concern about, people not having time, the Nepalese translator and the audio team and the tech team and so on. So anyway.
개와 세경이 개와 있는 데네 야 도케와 있는 데가 우체 파스는 거 나 개와 있는 진주 상황이고 초중 문제를
Kimber does it, and she would say, when we talk about someone being expert or scholar,
개와 믿는 거 주제 도서만 개부 다저를 막 육사는데
in a sutra context, that means being expert in the Madhyamaka, Abhidhamma, and Pramana, and so on. Being expert in to be an expert in Tantra means to be expert in the Guhyagarbha Tantra. Just knowing how to entertain old men and women, that does not qualify you as being an expert. So it seems I would not, in Kimber Daza Rinpoche's eyes, qualify as an expert. Was it so? Maybe I cannot perhaps give very extensive explanation of the kind of content of the text, but what I can do is tell a lot of stories in connection with the text. Anyway, let's continue on with the text. The method for dedicating, this is divided into 4. So what one dedicates, sources of good. What we're dedicating are termed good because they give rise to happiness as their fully ripened effect. So good or virtue, this actually means happiness. It implies happiness. And these sources of good or virtue are also sources because they are causes of happiness. So the scholar who explains karmic cause and effect said all of Buddha's teachings rest in karmic cause and effect, caused by the seed and result. And this is in line with this principle of karmic cause and effect. This is in line with modern science, interdependence and cause and effect, like the fact that from barley seed comes barley. From barley seed, rice does not come, barley comes. This is scientific, the scholar said. This is in accord with the way things are. So all of Buddha's teachings are scientific. So karma is the cause, effect. So in Tibetan we say leje, which means karmic cause and effect. So he explained le, karma, means karmic cause, and je means effect, there is karmic result. So this was in the context of a next commentary on the Prajnaparamita, and I thought this was a very beautiful and very pertinent explanation. Basically, you're saying Buddhist teachings, one fundament of Buddhist teachings is karmic cause and effect and interdependence, and these are basically science. So when people, these are basically science. May all beings' positive deeds, those they've done, will do, or now doing, become entirely good on the same level as all the good there has been. We can dedicate positive deeds regardless of when they're done, who does them, or what form they take, as the quote just read illustrates. So even the deeds deeds performed by others, you can dedicate. Of course, you can dedicate your own virtue, but you can also dedicate the virtue of others. You can dedicate the virtue of others, of all other beings, virtue from the past, from the future. So, regardless of when they're done, who does them, or what form they take, they can be dedicated. Now, positive actions can be classified according to 5 groups of 3 criteria. First of all, 3 kinds of doer. positive actions performed by oneself, by others, and those that are done by both. In the past, in Bhutan, not in the present times, but a few generations back, the Queen Mother in Bhutan would sponsor and support the practice and activities of a lot of bhikshus and practitioners. For instance, she would sponsor monks and practitioners to go on pilgrimage. So much virtue in that, right? So that would be an example of positive actions performed by others, right? Now, positive deeds performed in the 3 times, those that have been done in the past, the present, and the future. You can dedicate all of these types of virtue right now, virtue of past, present, and future. Like Khenpo Kumbha says in his Nectar of Manjushu speech, he says, what are we doing when we dedicate virtue from the future, virtue that hasn't even been accumulated yet? He says, what we're doing there is we're preempting attachment to future virtue. By dedicating it right now, before it's even been accumulated, we're preempting any attachment, any fixation on that virtue. So once if you've given something away in advance, like you've dedicated it to someone, you've allocated it to someone ahead of time, well then you have to keep your word, right? If you've already given it away, you've already allocated it. Like if you say, oh, this horse of mine is to be given to this lama. Well, when the time comes, you actually have to hand the horse over, right? So it's like that. We're saying, all the virtue I accumulate in the future, well, I'm going to dedicate all of it to enlightenment. I'm going to give it all away for the sake of enlightenment for beings. So you've given it away before you've done it. Third, we have virtue performed by body, by speech, and mind. These 3. So all virtuous actions you perform with your body, giving, assisting others, even like the songs, the traditional songs of Ngondro, these honestly are real sources of virtue. The lyrics are so beautiful. They're all full of praises for the sacred sites in the area, praises for one's parents and their kindness. So these would be examples of virtue of speech, right? And then virtue of mind. So having a pure intention, a sincere intention, faith, pure perception. Now we have virtue in terms of the actual action that's meritorious. In this regard, there's virtue that arises from giving, discipline, and meditation. So discipline, maintaining the discipline of the Mahayana, the discipline that refrains from negative actions, that gathers virtuous qualities, that benefits others, and so on. The meditation, there's different types of meditation trained in according to the various vehicles. Shamatha Vipassana, the different types of shamatha and vipassana, so on. And the foundational vehicle, Mahayana, great perfection, all of these. And virtue in terms of the fully ripened effect. Here there are positive acts consistent with worldly ends, liberation and omniscience. All these 5 sets of 3 can be included in one's dedication. Of these, the most important is the merit that comes from meditation. Why? Because it is virtue free of concepts of the 3 spheres, pure of the 3 spheres. So that is why it is the most authentic and important. As Ngondro's entering the way of the greater vehicle, there's an excellent story and explanation that illustrates this point. To dedicate to this life's goals with thoughts full of attachment or aversion, in order to defeat our enemies, say or gain something we desire, this is wrong dedication. So, like squabbling, fighting with your family, friends, or with anyone, indeed. Like making all sorts of oaths, swearing like, I swear on this that I will hurt you or something. This kind of thing. It's actually really negative acts. They're real sources of harm and suffering. And they can be causes for taking rebirth as a spirit. If you die, if you're on deathbed, you make terrible oaths or threats. This can actually be a cause for you being reborn as a spirit. This spirit Shukden, that's how he became who he was, who he is. Sentient beings in the bardo, the intermediate state, are incredibly sensitive. So we should really be very careful around the deceased. Instead of, say, your father or someone in your family dies, and then you lie on their corpse, shaking their corpse, saying, "How can you leave me? How can you leave me? How dare you? How will we survive without you? Your children are going to suffer," or something. You're causing incredible distress to the consciousness of the deceased. It can really disturb them and really cause obstacles for their smooth passage. So we should be careful about these things. And as I said before, it's very meritorious to build a stupa, for instance, in the name of a deceased relative or a deceased person, dedicate the merit to them. But you should not put, say, your parents, you should not put the deceased person's bones and ashes and so on inside the stupa. This is really incorrect. Buddha himself said this. This can actually cause real harm to the deceased person, to place their relics in a sacred object like a stupa, so that they have people paying homage to them. We have the story from Buddhist time where a non-Buddhist teacher passed away. He fell into hell, and every time his students made offerings to his remains, a shower of lava fell down on him and caused him incredible torment. And he ended up sending a message up to some Buddhist disciples requesting their help.
Didra Martin, Lama Shita Tandir Shorter. Oh, yeah, Dansa, the Tamang Shorten Kajam. One money shortens are Tomoku that the Tamu Jam today, Bao to Baji also. That did about
It's really not correct to build stupas containing the remains of just ordinary people. Like we build stupas containing the relics of sublime beings, holy beings. But these days, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is building stupas for their parents and just ordinary people. Anyway, when you do this, it's very problematic and it's incorrect. Then you're placing those remains of an ordinary person inside an object of homage. People are then doing prostrations and kura and bowing down to this object of homage, thinking it's thinking they're paying homage to enlightenment, because a stupa actually embodies the 37 factors of awakening, the 37 factors which make up the path of the Mahayana. All of these 37 factors are actually present within a stupa, different aspects of the stupa, its design and so on. There's some people recently who, not traditionally, but according to the Vinaya Bhikshus, so traditionally according to the Vinaya Bhikshus, hold a special staff, a staff called a karsul, which it's made in a very specific way. Every aspect of this staff has symbolic meaning, has special meaning. These days there are some people saying that, I think it's Osho Rinpoche saying that bhikshus would carry this staff as a means for self-defense, to fight off dogs, fight off bandits and so on. It's completely mistaken, complete nonsense. It's not such a problem if someone misunderstands and misexplains like a minor point, but if like major fundamental points are misunderstood and explained incorrectly, then everything is turned upside down, right? So we're talking about the goal to which one makes the dedication. We are not dedicating virtue for this life, to this life's goals and thoughts with minds of attachment or aversion, so that I dedicate this virtue so I can gain wealth, so I can gain status, so that I can be successful, so I can find a good spouse, so that my children will prosper. That is, those mundane short-term aims are not what we're dedicating our virtue to. That is wrong. That would be wrong dedication. Dedicating in order to obtain happiness as a god or human in the next life is inferior dedication. Do not therefore dedicate with such ideas in mind. As Master Ashwagosha says, all these sources good that I have accomplished, I dedicate in the cause of the state beyond the world, and so on. The state beyond the world comprises the 3 levels of nirvana. Of them, the listeners and solitary realizers, nirvanas, are inferior with respect to the great real cause nirvana, so we should not dedicate to these, for as the Buddha advises,
Sanji Korongesa Ango Gormato, Timato, Shadal, Manager Pemba Medicine. More Jay is a new two Gilamana, Shiva Choji.
We must dedicate all of our positive deeds, all of our virtue to enlightenment. Otherwise, if we dedicate to some other goal, that dedication will be impure. Should dedicate this source of good only to the level of Buddhahood. Do not dedicate it to the levels of listeners or solitary realizers or to other levels. All of it I dedicate to enlightenment. We find this line in the prayer of good action. For instance, say you have a good harvest one year, right? You said, oh, I had a good year this year, which means you had a good harvest. When you have a good harvest, then you don't just get like a big, good crop of grains and whatever things you planted, wheat and barley and so on. You also end up with a lot of straw, with a lot of hay, a lot of chaff, food for your livestock, right? So, as it says, similarly, by dedicating to that end, by dedicating to enlightenment, incidentally you'll reap all kinds of happiness in the meanwhile, such as long life, good health, and so on, like the bran one gets as a byproduct with the grain from a good harvest. So, these short-term benefits of good life, good health, long life, and so on, these are the side effects, the incidental side effects of dedicating virtue to enlightenment. Just like straw, hay, and chaff are the side effects, so to speak, the byproducts of harvest of grains. For whose sake one dedicates. If we dedicate our merit to ourselves alone or to a few people like our relatives and friends, its benefit will be diminished and it will be wasted. Like, oh, I dedicate this so that my children will be successful, so that my husband will be successful, so that our family will prosper. Such dedications are just mundane dedications. They lead to merely mundane results. So that would be a mundane dedication. We also have wrong dedication, which is to dedicate your virtue to negative ends. Right? So even if it's an enormously positive action, if you dedicate it to mundane ends or negative ends, its benefit, it will be wasted. It will go to waste. So we should dedicate all virtues so that all beings, as numerous as space is vast, attain unsurpassable enlightenment, feeling for them, for all mother beings, in immense love and compassion. For in the countless times they've been our parents, they have shown us nothing but kindness. And we have these quotations from Shantideva's The Way of the Bodhisattva. Directly then or indirectly, do nothing that is not for others' sake, and solely for their welfare dedicate your every action to the gaining of enlightenment. So, Shantideva teaches dedication with this and other verses in his dedication chapter in The Way of the Bodhisattva. Even a small source of good dedicated in this way for the benefit and happiness of all beings will grow bigger and bigger and result in the boundless accumulation of merit, because merit that is created with boundless beings in mind will be equally boundless. So, such is the difference between such is the difference between dedication made free of the concepts of the three spheres. All positive actions that are not thus nourished by bodhicitta are like the plantain tree. We have discussed these points before. On the other hand, virtuous deeds impregnated with bodhicitta are like the wish-fulfilling tree. Once they've borne fruit, they continue to spread. So rather than being spent, they continue to spread and grow more and more until the heart of enlightenment is reached. So, Now below we have a quotation from the Ornament of the Sutras, which seems actually is not from the Ornament of the Sutras, but from another treatise. Because they're not completed by outer conditions and the acts themselves are not perfect, even though their intention is pure, they will not be transcendent discipline. So, Kyabji Jujunum Mishe has attributed this to Maitreya's Ornament of the Sutras, but I looked in the root text for Ornament of the Sutras and also its commentaries, searching for this quotation and explanation, but it seems it's not actually from this text. But this is one of the qualities of Kyabji Jujunum Mishe. All of these teachings of the sutras and tantras he knew off by heart. And in any case, he's attributed it to that Ornament of the Sutras here. But so it's from another text, no doubt a text by one of the two supreme or six ornament scholars. And the meaning of this quotation is not that clear, but certainly it is connected to bodhicitta. Its meaning is connected to bodhicitta. So, but a dedication underpinned by the extraordinary association of skillful means and wisdom, the unity of shamatha and vipassana, that will be a dedication that possesses the four excellent features. So even if you have pure discipline, if you're keeping your vows purely, if you have any conceit about that, then that conceit corrupts your discipline. This is taught clearly in the Ornament of Clear Realization. Likewise with bodhicitta. If one's virtue, the virtue cultivated by bodhicitta is not infused by, one's virtue is not infused by bodhicitta and sealed with dedication, then it will be compromised. A dedication underpinned by the extraordinary association of skillful means and wisdom will be a dedication that possesses the four excellent features, as the same text shows. So it's not the Ornament of the Sutras. It's from another treatise. If some of the scholars here could do some research and find out where these verses are from, that would be excellent. In any case, they're talking about dedication, and it's important to ensure that your attitude is correct in this respect. So now we dedicate the merit and stop for a break.